So I'm about to get my first potatoes underway in the next couple of days, and they'll go into the polytunnel, and that gets them going really early and gives us 1 or 2 early potatoes. So I'm going to set up 4 pots, and I was just looking at the label from last year, Charlotte potatoes, and it was almost exactly the same time as year. And I'm going to just put this in the bottom, probably 4 or 5 inches in the bottom of each one, and then my recycled compost will go on top, and that'll be the start of the potato season. So let's get these with some compost in the bottom. The transplanting of dahlias and tulips that I did for the patio seemed to be working out okay. No activity here yet, but it's early for this dahlia, but it's nice and stable in there. And the tulips that I transplanted have done really well. Plenty of new growth and some buds, and I've got some spaces in the back there and a space over here. So I've purchased some new dahlias from a company called Farmer Gracie, which I've never used before. They come with this instruction booklet, which is helpful, and a postcard and some really fancy packaging. A really nice parcel to receive. And the 2 dahlias that I've bought are Franz Kafka and Pooh Swan Island. One's a pom-pom and one's a more traditional dahlia, but very colourful. And I've also ordered with that package 3 packets of ranunculus, which I've learned are quite involved in terms of growing, and they need to be soaked for 4 hours in water, ideally with water being changed every hour. So I'm going to need a bit of lead time to get those organised, and I think I'm going to do that over the house. But today I'm going to get these dahlias off to an early start by potting them into 2 pots and just getting them going before I put them out into those Belfast sinks. So let's have a look what these dahlias look like when they've come out of the package. So this is the Pooh Swan Island, and they're in a nice brown paper bag for the purpose. And that's the tuber, and it's quite large. There's one broken off there, and that's the original stem. So we're going to get this into the pot and bury the tubers and just have this stem so that it's just slightly above the surface of the compost. So that's that one, and then this one. Very similar, if anything. Yeah, very similar. Again, some of the tubers are a bit broken, but I'm sure they'll be all right once they get going. So we'll get those into these 2 pots and label them up as well. Well, we had negative temperatures last night, so I'm glad I put this fleece on. Let's have a quick look and see what we got down to. And under there we're recording 1 degree, so certainly all the layers and the covers help a great deal. But I'm going to uncover all these today because it's a bright and warm day, and it's already 20 degrees in the polytunnel. So onward and upward. There's some great news for the chickens. It looks like towards the end of this month that the authorities will allow fowl and chickens generally to be released so that they can go outside, which is fantastic news. And I know mine are desperate to get out, and we'll be able to use this new netting arrangement that I put in place and test it, which will be wonderful. I've had a lot of inquiries from subscribers about this netting, and I've reached out to the company to ask if there's a link that people can have, so I'll put that in the description below. I don't benefit from it whatsoever, so it's not a case that you're helping the channel, but I know that people have been interested, so I'm really happy to provide that information. So this morning is a delivery of manure, and I'm not going to film it because you've seen it many times, but it is interesting to look at these bays, and these were absolutely full only a few weeks back, and you can see how much of the compression has taken place as it's begun to rot down, and all three of these will need topping up now. I've been putting quite a lot of food waste into this one, but the delivery that I've got today will just top these off, and I'm advised by my supplier that it's likely that the intervals between deliveries now will move out probably to once every 8 weeks as the horses get turned out. So it's coming to an end, but that's fine. We've got a full load of bays ready for next year, and I just need to get that turned over once during the summer to make sure it keeps decomposing well. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Mole have continued with their major excavations. But I was a bit disappointed. They had the audacity to dump their excavation onto the gravel path. Well, that's going to cause a bit of extra work, but there we are. That's nature. I think I'm going to wait until they've finished, otherwise I'll be doing it multiple times. I'm sure they'll get on their way very shortly. Sorted one 10-foot trailer, top those off nicely, and I'll cover those up now and just keep an eye on them. They may need a little bit of water over the coming weeks, but they'll rot down pretty quickly, and that's compost brewing for next year. Good times. Mrs. K's been busy this weekend. We were given a number of plants from our next door neighbour on the plot, and this foxglove was one of them, so that's gone in. That's going to look nice at the back, and also some of these Spanish bluebells. They've got a really big bulb on the bottom, so we've planted a couple of groups of those, and we've also taken out of the polytunnel this fella, which is a camellia, and it's just starting to shoot nicely. And we've got a reasonably good show of daffodils, which is nice to see. So this is coming on now, and a little bit more work to do, but we're hoping to get a full beautiful bed this year. I'm sure we'll get there. The pond has also had some additions. Let me show you. So early days with the pond, but we didn't just get one of those foxgloves, we got 4, and we've put 3 in alongside and up that bank, which we hope will act as a nice screen. And we're going to try and keep the majority of plants in here native, and of course foxgloves grow fairly wild in this area, so that's good. And the lily seems to be doing pretty well. See a couple more leaves. I've been deliberating about the paths for a few days now, and I don't think I've got enough wood chip, even if I rake it up, to do 4 paths. So I think what I'm going to do is take everything up from that path and move it across and see if I can just get one that's reasonably well covered. And then, because of the success of the chicken manure paths, which I put up onto the squash bed, I'm going to do one more here, which should get me through this season. So a bit of raking, a bit of clearing up, and see if I can set that path is going to be on my agenda. It's official. Chicken bedding manure is out of stock, and we don't know when we'll be replenished. There we go. It's gone in well. So that's 2 of the walkways covered in that innovative chicken manure pathway. And okay, it's a bit experimental, but I don't mind pioneering something like this. It could just work out to be fantastic. We'll see. When I was doing this path, I noticed that I've got a fair few purple sprouting broccoli coming up now. We'll soon be having a feast off of these, which is fantastic. And they've stood the test of time. And if you remember, this was a bed that had the dreaded clubroot, and I put all these plants in with a fair old handful of garden lime, and there's only one that's really suffered, and I really don't think that that is because of clubroot. I think it's because it just took such a big hit in the frost, and you can see the remnants of the frost damaged leaves, which I've still to pull off. But those plants are beginning to look nice and healthy, and that'll be a few weeks and quite a good crop, I'm hoping. Thought I'd get these ranunculus in today. I've never grown ranunculus before, but I do love the flower. So I've got 3 varieties: white, pink and mixed. So the score here is soak these for 4 hours and then they swell up, and then you can put them in a tray or something to get them sprouting before you plant them on further. So these are quite unusual to look at. I'll show you. So really odd, but fairly shrunken, almost look like small dahlias. And I'm just going to drop those in the water, and the water has to be changed every hour, and they go in there for 4 hours. So I'm using 3 different buckets so that I don't get them mixed up, but you could of course put them in some sort of mesh bag and drop them into one bucket. So that's the mixed, this is the pink and the white, and I'll show you what they look like when they've come out of this process. Hopefully considerably larger and ready to be put into a tray of soil. The weather is playing with us. It's warm today and predicted for the end of the week snow. So just don't get caught putting out plants that are not going to survive, and make sure you cover up everything in your greenhouses and polytunnels, or if you've got delicate things in the garden, get some fleece over them and you'll save them, hopefully. So it's gone a bit frantic in here. I'll show you what I mean. Everything I potted on is coming on well. The lobelia shooting on nicely, all the lettuce are growing well, and the tomatoes, I've had one casualty, that one's died, but the others are doing fine, and that's just perfect. I've got some leeks coming on. These are the strawberries that were hit by the frost, and they're still coming through, no problem. The sweet peas that I potted from my saved seed, yeah, they're really cracking on. It won't be long before I'm thinking about putting them in the cold frame, I think, just to see if I can harden them off. My salad box full of mixed lettuce is doing really well, and I think I've prepared these 2. I'll be putting seed in for those this week. And my leeks have come through at last, which is reassuring. I was worried that they weren't going to come through because they took a little while. And then in here, well, it's doing really well. This pot of globo onions, just crazy. So I'm going to have to be pricking some of these out and putting them into bigger trays. And I've had a bit of a problem with these 3 trays. I'll show you what I mean in a moment. But these broad beans have done really, really well. And that deep root and growing in the cooler temperatures of the polytunnel, it's probably the most successful crop of seedlings I've had from broad beans. And I just need to make sure they don't grow too tall, but the temperatures are keeping the growth rate down, which is fantastic. I've got a few tomatoes here to prick out and pot on. That's the tomato lata and Roma. So there's another 7 in there. And temperatures today sitting at 23. Okay, let me show you these trays. Quite interesting. I'm pretty careful when I'm sowing seed, but either I drop some seed into the compost when I was mixing it, or I just jogged and spilt some seed. But if you look at these, so this is spring onions, and I seem to have 3 or 4 cabbage-like seedlings in there. This is chives, which haven't come up, and I've got a cabbage in there. This is herb, lime, basil, and I think these are lime basil, but this looks like a cabbage. This is herb dill, and I've got a good 3 or 4 in there, and a cabbage. And these are the cabbage filderkraut. So something went wrong here. And in this tray, we've got sweet peas and a cabbage or 2. And these are auricula. They seem to be fine. And then sweet pea, and I got some cabbage in there. So, and this is celeriac, and I got a couple of cabbage in there. So that went wildly wrong. And then this one, which is 2 different types of beetroot, cabbage is coming up everywhere. So I must have slipped. I certainly have a problem, and I'm simply going to tackle that by snipping each one of those cabbages I don't want and then taking them out of the equation. So simple as that, and then letting the seeds that I intended to come through. What's also interesting is this Charles Dowding tray, which I sowed with lobelia and aquilegia, and the lobelia coming through nicely. I think there's a couple of aquilegia, but those lobelia seeds were so fine, I really struggled to sow them well, and that's showing. But the biggest challenge I have with this tray type, and it's excellent, is keeping it moist. And I water it regularly, but they do dry out. You can see there how those are really dried out. So I think I'm going to be putting this on some capillary matting just to keep the moisture levels up. But it makes you consider what you grow in these very small cells. They have their use, but I think I've got to be careful what I sow. What I have bought from the same company as those is these deeper ones, and this supports my philosophy this year of deep rooted seedlings. And this is the same material, produced by the same company. Great holes in the bottom for pushing up, and I'm sure they are going to be excellent. And there's therefore 2 or 3 different types that I've got in use now. I'll put those into use very shortly. I've got this much deeper and larger tray for deep root training, which I really like. And of course I've got the cells that are deep rooted trainers that open like clamshells. So we've got 3 different types of deep rooted seed trays in use, and it'll be really interesting to see how they all perform as the season goes on. Now I'm 6'1", maybe 6'1.5", and these crossbars here unfortunately take me out every now and then, or at least give me a bit of a mark. And I have had some foam around them, but it disintegrated in the sun. While I was in the garage the other day, I found this wrap for going around plumber's pipes or pipe work. So I'm just going to fashion some sort of bumper to stop my head hitting these poles, because when I get deeply involved in what I'm doing, I forget and pay the consequences. So I'm just going to cut this in half, and then cut down the centre and stick this up there. Hopefully that will save my head a little bit. So see how I get on. I might go and get a Stanley knife, easier than scissors. So I'm going to finish this off with a couple of cable ties just to hold them in place at the ends. There's one there. And one there. There should be some cushioned collisions from now on. I think I might just put one more in the middle just to hold it in place. I'm going to quickly run out of space in the polytunnel, so it won't be long before I start using the cold frame outside. And basically it's just a question of priorities, and things like the strawberries that I saved after that bad bout of frost, they'll go out there because they're already starting to establish nicely, and I can get some more space available then inside the polytunnel. And I could take my seedlings down low because it helps protect them from the frost, which I learnt to my cost early on in the year. And now's the time to get sowing with some volume, so hopefully the space will be enough. Well, I'm going to prick out and pot on these globo onions, and there's probably 100 here, and I'm going to put as many as I can into this deep root seedling tray, and any that are spare I'm just going to leave in here, top up with a bit of compost, and that'll make sure that I've got some backup if I need it. And then just 7 pots for these tomatoes, which are coming on nicely and have got those characteristic purple stems now, which always indicates to me that they're becoming a bit more hardy. So I'll get on with those. That's 45 globos pricked out and potted on. It's interesting to see the footprint of this tray. I mean, it's a very deep tray, which is fantastic. It's quite large, and it gives you 45 seedling positions. This one gives you 40, much less space, but the footprint of it is that much smaller. So it'll be interesting to see how they compare once they've been growing for a while. We'll see. So on to the Bedfordshire Champions, and we'll get 40 of those up and running. So the reason I'm putting seedlings into deep pots like this is so that I get good root growth, and that gives you some sort of idea of the root growth that was occurring in that deeper pot. And of course, when you go to transplant those into a deep root trainer like these, it means you end up with a really strong plant. At least that's the plan. I do hope you enjoyed the video today. If you did, click the subscribe button, click the like button, and if you want updates from me each time I upload a video, click the bell and select all. I do hope you have a great day. Diolch yn fawr.